Dolly Rebecca Parton was born on January 19, 1946, in a one-room log cabin on the banks of the Little Pigeon River in Pittman Center, Tennessee, a tiny Appalachian town tucked in the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains. She was the fourth of 12 children born to A.V. Lee and Robert Lee Parton. Her father, a hard-working sharecropper and construction worker, was illiterate but sharp, known by locals as a shrewd businessman despite his limited schooling. Dolly would later say that her dad couldn't read or write, but he could count money better than anybody. Her mother, A.V. Lee, was a homemaker and devout Pentecostal. She was musically inclined, known to sing old mountain ballads passed down from her ancestors of Welsh descent. Dolly's first exposure to music came through the sounds of her mother's voice, hymns in the church, and the haunting beauty of Appalachian folk songs that floated through the hills. By age 6, she was singing in her grandfather's church. By 7, she had cobbled together her own guitar with a piece of wood and some strings. When she was 8, her uncle Bill Owens, a fellow musician, gave her her first real guitar. He also became her earliest songwriting collaborator and biggest champion. The Parton family didn't have much. Dolly has often joked that she was dirt poor. She grew up wearing clothes made from feed sacks and sleeping multiple children to a bed. But what they lacked in money, they made up for in music, faith, and love. The stories of her upbringing, with tales of cornmeal mush for dinner and bathing in a creek, became the emotional foundation of her later songs. Coat of Many Colors, one of her most beloved ballads, was inspired by a real story. Her mother stitching together a jacket out of rags and telling her it was a coat of many colors, just like Joseph's in the Bible. By the time she was 10, Dolly was singing on local radio stations in Knoxville. At 13, she made her first appearance on national television via the Caswalker Farm and Home Hour, a regional variety show that introduced young musical talent. She also recorded her first single that year, Puppy Love, on Gold Band Records, an indie label known for swamp pop and rockabilly. Though the song didn't chart, it set her career in motion. Dolly always knew she wanted more than what the Smokies could offer. She once told an interviewer, "I knew I had to get out. I had to dream big or stay small." It was that determination, fierce, unflinching, and sparkling even as a child, that set the stage for her rise. In 1964, the day after graduating from Sevier County High School, Dolly packed her suitcase and moved to Nashville. She had no money, no connections, just her voice, her songs, and a head full of dreams. Her early days in Music City weren't easy. She lived in cheap apartments, endured endless rejection, and hustled every possible opportunity. She got a publishing deal first, writing songs for other singers. Alongside Uncle Bill Owens, she co-wrote Put It Off Until Tomorrow, which became a top 10 hit for Bill Phillips in 1966, and was even sung by a then-unknown backing vocalist, Dolly herself. The song's success brought her to the attention of Monument Records, who signed her. But the label thought she had too rough a twang for country radio and tried to market her as a pop artist. Her early pop singles like Happy Happy Birthday Baby had modest success, but Dolly knew country was her true voice. Everything changed in 1967 when country star Porter Wagoner invited Dolly to join his weekly syndicated TV show, The Porter Wagoner Show. He was already a household name with a loyal following, and the partnership launched Dolly into the spotlight. Their harmonies were immediate magic, her bright soprano layering perfectly over his baritone, and audiences quickly warmed to the duo. Together, they released a string of duet albums, scoring hits like The Last Thing on My Mind, Just Someone I Used to Know, and Please Don't Stop Loving Me. Dolly became a fixture on television screens across America and soon earned her own following, independent of Wagoner. Though their partnership was fruitful, it was also fraught with tension. Dolly, always ambitious, wanted to branch out on her own. Wagoner, who had helped her rise, wasn't ready to let go. Their professional split was famously chronicled in 1974's I Will Always Love You, a song Dolly wrote for Porter as both a farewell and a thank you. It wasn't a breakup song, it was a graceful exit letter. Porter reportedly cried the first time he heard it. The song would go on to become one of the most iconic country ballads of all time, hitting #1 on the country charts not once, but twice. in its original version and again in 1982, when Dolly re-recorded it for the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. And, of course, it was reborn once again when Whitney Houston turned it into a global pop anthem in 1992. The 1970s would mark Dolly's transition from a Nashville darling to a cross-genre powerhouse, but her roots, and the foundation laid with Wagoner, would always stay with her. As the 1970s took flight, Dolly Parton was no longer just the protege of Porter Wagoner. She had evolved into a solo force, both on the charts and in American culture. Her music, always rooted in Appalachian storytelling, began to take on sharper edges and more ambitious arrangements. And with that momentum came a hit that would define a decade. Jolene. Released in 1973, Jolene was inspired by a real moment. Dolly once told the story of a red-haired bank teller who flirted with her husband, Carl Dean. Though Dolly never saw it as serious, she turned the tension into one of the most iconic country songs ever written. With a pleading voice and hypnotic guitar riff, Jolene became a #1 hit in the US and abroad. Its minimalism made it timeless. The lyrics were simple, a woman begging another not to steal her man, but the emotion was raw, aching, and utterly real. At the same time, Dolly's image began to evolve. She leaned into her signature look, platinum blonde hair, rhinestone-studded outfits, bold makeup, and high heels. It was exaggerated, almost camp, but entirely self-aware. "It costs a lot of money to look this cheap," she famously quipped. People underestimated her because of her looks. That was her secret weapon. With her newfound fame, Dolly also began breaking into mainstream entertainment. Her 1977 album, Here You Come Again, marked her first real crossover into pop music. The title track went top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, proving that her appeal extended far beyond country radio. By the end of the decade, Dolly Parton wasn't just a star, she was a brand. In 1980, she made her acting debut in the hit comedy 9 to 5, co-starring Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. The movie, a workplace satire about 3 women turning the tables on their sexist boss, struck a chord with working-class audiences and feminists alike. It was a box office smash. Dolly not only starred in the film, but also wrote its title track. 9 to 5 Inches became a cultural anthem, a song about hard-working women tired of being underpaid and overlooked. It earned Dolly an Academy Award nomination and 2 Grammys, and it cemented her reputation as a multi-talented powerhouse. She was now a triple threat: singer, songwriter, actress, and she was just getting started. In the early 1980s, Dolly was at her commercial peak. She had conquered country, crossed into pop, and charmed Hollywood. But despite her mainstream success, she never left her country roots behind. She continued to release albums that blended heartfelt ballads with upbeat, radio-friendly hits. Her acting career continued with films like The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, 1982, where she starred alongside Burt Reynolds, and Rhinestone, 1984, with Sylvester Stallone, though the latter was critically panned. Still, Dolly's charisma was undeniable. Whether the film was a hit or a miss, audiences came to see her. One of the most pivotal moments of this era was the resurgence of I Will Always Love You. Originally written in 1974 as her goodbye to Porter Wagoner, Dolly re-recorded the song for Whorehouse, and it again topped the country charts. The track had now become part of the American songbook, but its final transformation came years later in 1992, when Whitney Houston covered it for the soundtrack of The Bodyguard. Houston's soaring rendition turned the song into a global sensation. It became one of the best-selling singles of all time, topping the Billboard Hot 100 for a record-breaking 14 weeks. Though Whitney's version was vastly different in style and scale, it preserved the emotional core of Dolly's writing. Dolly, who retained the publishing rights, earned millions in royalties. She reportedly once said, "I made enough money off that song to buy Graceland." But Dolly didn't just profit financially. She was publicly gracious and supportive of Houston's interpretation. She never demanded spotlight or ownership in interviews. Instead, she said, "I was honored." This is one of the most enduring examples of Dolly's brilliance. She had written a song with timeless emotional power. It worked as a stripped-down country ballad. It worked as a dramatic pop crescendo. And it worked because it was honest. By the mid-1990s, Dolly had transcended genre. She was no longer just a country star. or a pop icon or a movie actress. She was something larger. She was Dolly, and that name meant something all on its own. By the mid-1980s, Dolly Parton had become a household name, not just as an entertainer, but as a symbol of perseverance, kindness, and savvy business sense. It was during this period that she launched one of her most ambitious and personal ventures, Dollywood. Opened in 1986 in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, Dollywood was more than just a theme park. It was a tribute to Dolly's roots, a physical embodiment of her Appalachian upbringing, musical legacy, and devotion to family and community. Built on the site of a former amusement park called Silver Dollar City, Dollywood combined thrill rides with Southern hospitality, live music, crafts, and cultural exhibits celebrating the Smoky Mountains. Dolly wasn't just the face of the park, she was its soul. From the Butterfly Garden to the Chasing Rainbows Museum, which houses her stage costumes and awards, every corner of Dollywood is infused with her personal story. The park grew into one of the most visited tourist destinations in the southeastern United States, drawing over 3 million visitors a year. In interviews, Dolly often emphasized how Dollywood allowed her to give back to the region that shaped her. The park created thousands of jobs, boosted the local economy, and became a place where Southern culture, often overlooked or caricatured in mainstream media, could be celebrated with dignity. Dollywood wasn't just an economic success. It became an emotional anchor for Dolly herself. She once said, "I've always wanted to do something for my people." I don't mean that in a vain way. I mean, literally, my people. The folks who live here. My family, my kin, my fans. As the park expanded, adding a water park, resort hotel, and festivals, it became clear that Dolly Parton was more than an entertainer. She was a builder, a steward of Appalachian pride. And through Dollywood, she found a way to preserve and elevate the traditions of the very mountains that raised her. Dolly Parton's fame never isolated her from the struggles of ordinary people. In fact, it made her more determined to help. Among her most celebrated achievements outside of music and entertainment is the Imagination Library, a global literacy initiative that began with a simple idea. Every child, regardless of income, should have books at home. Started in 1995 in Sevier County, Tennessee, the program began by mailing free books each month to children under the age of 5. By 2000, it had expanded across the U.S., and today, the Imagination Library operates in multiple countries and has distributed over 200 million books. Dolly's motivation stemmed from watching her father, intelligent and resourceful but unable to read or write, struggle with illiteracy. She wanted to spare other children from that barrier. "If you can read, you can learn anything about everything," she once said. The program has been praised by educators, parents, and literacy advocates around the world. It's not just charity, it's empowerment. The books are chosen carefully, with age-appropriate and inclusive themes, and the program is administered through local partnerships, ensuring a sense of community ownership. But that's just one thread in Dolly's tapestry of philanthropy. Over the years, she has donated millions to healthcare, disaster relief, education, and environmental causes. She gave $1 million to Vanderbilt University Medical Center in 2020 to help fund COVID-19 vaccine research, a gift that directly supported the development of the Moderna vaccine. When wildfires devastated parts of East Tennessee in 2016, including areas near her hometown, Dolly quickly set up the My People Fund, which provided direct cash assistance to families who had lost their homes. The fund gave $1,000 per month for 6 months to over 900 families, plus a final $5,000 bonus payment at the end. She has quietly paid for scholarships, funeral expenses, and medical care for people she never met, simply because someone told her they needed help. And through it all, she's remained humble. "I don't do it for credit," she said. "I do it because I see myself in those folks." Dolly Parton's generosity isn't a side project. It's central to who she is. She's used her fame and fortune not just to build a career, but to lift up others in tangible, life-changing ways. By the 1990s and early 2000s, many artists of Dolly Parton's generation began to fade from mainstream relevance. Radio was shifting, country music was turning increasingly pop, and younger artists dominated the charts. But Dolly, She did what she always had. She adapted. On her own terms. In 1999, she surprised critics and fans by returning to her roots with The Grass is Blue, a stripped-down bluegrass album that featured no glitz, no gloss, just the mountain music that raised her. The record was a hit with critics and won the Grammy for Best Bluegrass Album. Suddenly, Dolly wasn't just a legend, she was cool again. This album marked the beginning of what fans and journalists often refer to as Dolly's Renaissance period. Over the next few years, she released a string of albums, Little Sparrow, Halos and Horns, Those Were the Days, that leaned heavily into Appalachian instrumentation, gospel harmonies, and traditional storytelling. She was writing songs again with that raw, unfiltered edge that had always made her stand out. She also used this period to reclaim parts of her identity. The media had often reduced to jokes. Her appearance, her accent, her southernness. In interviews, she became more vocal about sexism in the industry, about the complexities of her image, and about the sharp intelligence that had always driven her business decisions. During this time, Dolly refused to slow down. She published memoirs, launched new music ventures, and even started working on Broadway adaptations of her work, including 9 to 5, the musical, which opened in 2009 and earned her a Tony nomination for Best Original Score. Younger generations began to rediscover her. Artists like Miley Cyrus, her goddaughter, Casey Musgraves, and Brandi Carlile cited her as a primary influence. Gay fans and feminists, who had long adored Dolly, now saw her openly embracing those communities. She became not only an icon, but a queer icon, a feminist icon, and a beacon of authenticity in an industry often built on artifice. And through it all, Dolly stayed. Dolly. Funny, self-deprecating, kind, and never, ever boring. One of the most fascinating things about Dolly Parton is that despite her global fame, she has always considered herself an outsider. In Nashville, she was a poor mountain girl with big dreams. In Hollywood, she was a country girl with big hair. In business, she was a woman in a man's world. Yet in every room, she found a way to shine, often by refusing to fit in. Her deep Christian faith has always been a cornerstone of her identity, but Dolly's version of spirituality is grounded in compassion, not judgment. "I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual," she has said. "I try to live by the golden rule, to treat people the way I'd like to be treated." She's written countless gospel songs and once released a full spiritual album titled Heart Songs, Live from Home. She's never pushed her beliefs on others, and perhaps that's part of why she resonates with such a wide audience. She is inclusive, loving, and accepting, traits often lost in the shouting matches of modern celebrity discourse. Despite decades of fame, Dolly has managed to keep much of her private life private. Her marriage to Carl Dean has lasted since 1966, a remarkable feat in any world, let alone show business. Carl is famously reclusive, rarely appearing in public with Dolly, and avoiding the limelight entirely. Yet, she has often said that his support and groundedness helped keep her sane. She has no children of her own, a fact she's spoken about openly, saying she believes it was God's plan so she could be a mother figure to many through her work and philanthropy. And that's what she's become. Not just a star, but a maternal figure in American culture. A woman who's seen it all, who's taken the hits and kept singing, who can make you laugh with one sentence and cry with the next. Even as she entered her 70s and 80s, she didn't stop. She wrote books, launched a Netflix series, collaborated with younger artists, and continued to perform live. In 2022, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a rare feat for a country artist, and initially declined the honor, saying she didn't feel she'd earned it. When they insisted, she accepted and promptly announced she'd record a rock album to live up to it. That's Dolly Parton. Always humble, always hustling, always rewriting the rules. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and to leave a comment down below who should we make next video about. See you in the next one.